Hi, today we're talking about OAMP. OAMP's the second pedal that we're releasing. It's an output driver and clean gain creator, and I'm really excited about it, and I'm happy to finally release it to the world. If you haven't watched the video about Una, you might want to go and start there because they kind of complement each other, and there's a bunch of stuff in that video that may give you some insight into why I do some of these things.
Design concepts and philosophy stuff that's a bit much to go into again.
And that way I can skip over some of that information here. So what happened was, almost as soon as I finished Una and had a few laying around so that I could use it on my board, I started running two of them, one at the front, one in the back. And it's a familiar concept to a lot of players who will use a larger board. It's handy to have an output driver or buffer of some kind at the end of your chain so that you can kind of drive out to the amp and not worry about, the modulation pedals that we tend to run at the end of the chain don't always have tons of drive capability, or some gain pedals don't like to drive a ton of cable, and they may react very differently with different amps. So I want to eliminate from the equation and create this, which gives me some clean gain in hand and a little bit of tone shaping, and just a really solid driver out of the board so that my whole board can become like a modular channel strip. And we have our little input driver, and we have our little output driver, and we have all these cool things from all our friends in between, and they let me have a creative and flexible setup without really worrying too much about the impedance relationships and the drive and things that I tend to worry about because I'm a bit of a worry wart. Una running as an output driver works great. It's got great drive capability, and it's got great headroom, but there were a few things I started to notice that could benefit from having a specialized device, and it seemed like a natural place to go from a design standpoint of doing the input driver and the output driver and then having a little bookend. I had the second unit on the board and it was going great, and I just started to kind of make a list of things that I wanted that for the output driver that it didn't do. The first thing obviously is that it would make some gain so that you could drive the amp. These things have such great headroom, and putting a little bit of gain in hand really gives you the ability to take the signal coming out of your board and put it louder to your amp. A lot of pedals that are great drive pedals, in an audio sense, drive can mean two things. Drive means your ability to push signal down a wire, but in a guitar pedal context, it also means adding a little grit and adding a little kind of harmonic distortion. What I realized is that for me, I wanted a super clean output driver that wasn't adding any of its own distortion, but was giving me the option to hit the front of the amp harder without changing the sound. One of the reasons for this is that running at the end of the board, you tend to run after your modulation effects, and you might want to keep your reverb trails or your delays kind of nice and at least as clean as they were the way you drove them, and then just hit the front of the amp a little bit harder. It's a two-stage device, and the level control is a fader that's in between the two stages. So on some pedals, the gain control is actually changes the gain of the circuit. This doesn't do that. There's some gain controls to do that later because that'll change the tone. In some pedals, it'll either be a voltage divider hanging on the beginning or on the end, and that'll change the impedance relationship either coming in or going out. And we don't really want that when we can avoid it. So putting the level control in between those two stages means that where you set this doesn't affect the tone coming in or the tone going out. It'll be the same regardless, which gives you the confidence to use that level to drive the amp exactly how you want it. I like to, run a bunch of different amps and plug into weird bits of rack gear from time to time, and being able to maintain the tone coming out of the board, similar to how Una helps us maintain the tone going into the board, just gives me a lot of confidence and good, happy feelings about my board and what I'm doing with it. So these toggle switches here are gain settings for each of the two stages. The input stage has high, low, and then bright. And the bright is attached to the low setting because when you're running down here, you may want to poke a little bit of brightness up there. It's situated in a different place than the Una bright filter, just so you're not stacking the same filter twice, because that can get a little bit pokey. The output gain stage has a dark setting. You know, when you start driving the amps really hard, sometimes the brightness can get a little much, and being able to just have a little dark filter at the end of the pedal chain can allow you A, to control a bright amp, but also B, to use some top end within your chain on the floor to drive things a certain way, and then roll it off just at the end before you hit the amp, so that you're using that brightness to carry through all your pedals, get the best signal to noise you can, and you're darkening it up just before you send it out to the amp. Additionally, you can put bright and dark together, and it's a middle gain setting with bright and dark, and it makes a little mid hump. So if you have an amp that's overly scooped, you can do that and kind of balance that amp out a little bit. The presence control is a pretty simple way to dial in a bit of like, classic black panel amplifier mid scoop, tone stacks, and dial in a bit of the mid scoop that you'd associate with, like a 60s black panel amplifier. So dialing in a bit of that mid scoop, just get a little bit of that scoop in there, and it's great to have on a little dial so that you can tweak it exactly to your liking. I like older Tweed style circuits that don't have that tone stack that always puts it in. I'm really fond of that kind of nice little scoop in most guitar amps. And also we have a lot of drive pedals are coming out now that have big mid humps, which are great for drive, but sometimes being able to tailor it a little bit, dial it in, is really handy. So the presence knob on OAMP can dial in a bit of that mid scoop, so you can find a really perfect balance for you between mid forward drive pedals, a bit of scoop going in here, hitting whatever style of amplifier you like, and find that perfect little moment where all of your things come together and just kind of blossom into your tone. That's what we're all looking for. A lot of similar things about other 29 stuff. Same whatever power input, same bipolar rails on the inside, same beautiful bent steel chassis that we can use to protect a little bit from noise and hum coming into the signal, especially as we're driving out to the amp. And it's got a little picture on it. I think that kind of covers what this is and what it does. I hope you really enjoy it. If you have any other questions about it, you can always hit me up at the website. I do my best to hang out on some forums and things like that, so I'm reachable. But I think that's all I want to say about this today, and hope you have a great rest of your day.